Hello, everybody, and welcome back for another edition of Ukraine This Week with me, Don Arlett. A secret 28-point peace plan to end the war in Ukraine, concocted by the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Russia's Kirill Dmitriev, seems to be dead on arrival in Kyiv and other capitals around Europe. It essentially gives Russia its maximalist land grab, indemnifies Russia for the crime of aggression and war crimes committed while trying to take Ukraine by force. And furthermore, it will not pay for the destruction it unleashed. Europe will. However, the United States administration, led by President Trump, is pushing Ukraine to capitulate and sign the plan by next Thursday, already threatening to cut off intelligence sharing and weapon sales. The extent of which this is a living document, which is malleable, remains to be seen. Meanwhile, the $100 million corruption scandal referred to as Mindachgate is already showing signs of deeply hurting Ukraine after nearly 4 years of war. Calls for the president's top aide, Andriy Yermak, to step down due to involvement have been ignored by President Zelenskyy, raising further questions about the extent of the entrenchment of a shady network at the top of Ukraine's political leadership. We'll discuss this soon with our guest, but first, these reports from Ukraine this week. This week brought one of the deadliest Russian strike waves in months. Major diplomatic movements across Europe and heavy fighting along Ukraine's eastern front. Kyiv also faced questions over a reported U.S. peace proposal as winter pressure on the country's grid intensified. President Zelenskyy began the week in Paris, finalizing a major defense deal with France. The agreement opens the way for Ukraine to acquire modern French arms, including SAMP-T air defense systems and Rafale F-4 fighter jets, described by Zelenskyy as the most significant upgrade to Ukraine's air fleet since independence. From there, Zelenskyy traveled to Athens, signing an energy partnership with Greece to route U.S. liquefied natural gas through Greek pipelines from December of 2025. Kyiv says the deal secures nearly 2 billion euros worth of winter gas imports to compensate for Russian strikes on energy infrastructure. In Ankara, Zelenskyy met with Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Wednesday. The visit came as reports emerged that Washington had quietly floated possible peace terms to Moscow. A senior Ukrainian official told Reuters that Kyiv had not participated in those discussions. Erdogan urged partners to revive the Istanbul format. Kyiv later confirmed receiving a 28-point U.S. proposal allegedly discussed between special envoys from Washington and Moscow. That would see Ukraine reduce its army and accept Russian control over Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk in exchange for U.S. security guarantees. Although not officially confirmed by either Washington or Moscow, officials disclosed that the plan consists of 28 points and stems from the principles President Trump and President Putin agreed to in Alaska.
In the life of every nation, there comes a moment when honesty must come before everything else. Right now is one of the most difficult moments in our history. The pressure on Ukraine is among the strongest we have ever faced. We may find ourselves forced to choose, either losing our dignity or risking the loss of a key partner. We're facing either the difficult 28 points of the plan or an extremely hard, the most challenging winter ahead, along with other dangers. A life without freedom and dignity, without justice, and with expectations that we should trust someone who has attacked us twice. A response will be expected from us.
Russia launched 2 Iskander missiles and 128 drones across 4 regions on Monday, killing 8 people. In Balaklia, 2 missiles obliterated a residential district, killing 4 and wounding at least 15. A heavy drone attack hit Odessa's port and energy sites, damaging several civilian vessels. A Turkish LPG tanker burned just 500 meters from the Romanian border, prompting evacuation orders on the Romanian side due to the risk of explosion. In Dnipro on Tuesday, 35 Shahed drones struck the building housing the public broadcaster Suspilny and the city's television tower.
The first floor was damaged, but the most important thing is that all our staff are alive and unharmed. We continue to work.
On Wednesday, KH-101 cruise missiles fired from Tu-95MS bombers destroyed two 9-story buildings in Ternopil. At least 31 people, including 3 children, were confirmed dead and around 100 wounded. More than 230 rescuers worked throughout the night looking for victims. Drone strikes on residential blocks in Kharkiv wounded 46 people. Across frontline regions on Thursday, Sumy, Kharkiv, Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, Russia continued daily attacks. A man was killed cycling in the Kupiansk district. Fire ripped through farms in Synelikove, and grad rockets. Fires ripped through farms in Synelikove, and grad rockets hit residential areas near Nikopol. In Zaporizhia on Friday, guided bombs hit several apartment blocks, killing 5 people and wounding 8. Rescuers worked among smoldering debris.
A woman was screaming. We started clearing the debris. Together with a police officer, we began to pull her out.
Ukraine carried out another overnight attack on Russia's Ryazan refinery, one of the country's largest. Kyiv says secondary processing units were hit, part of a wider effort to disrupt Moscow's fuel supplies. Ukraine and Russia also exchanged the bodies of fallen soldiers, with Ukraine receiving about 1,000 sets of remains. Moscow says it received 30. Ukraine's parliament dismissed Justice Minister Herman Halushchenko and Energy Minister Svetlana Hrinchuk amid corruption probe at state nuclear operator Energoatom on Wednesday. This week, Italy approved Germany's extradition request for Ukrainian Sergei Kuznetsov in connection with the 2022 Nord Stream explosions. Kyiv says he remains protected under international humanitarian law. As winter sets in, Ukraine faces the combined pressure of mass strikes on civilians and infrastructure, contested diplomatic protocols, and grinding battles across the east. Kyiv says any settlement must deliver a peace that cannot be shattered by another invasion.
And now, joining us to discuss the $100 million corruption scandal and the 28-point U.S. Russian peace plan is Tetyana Shevchuk, head of the International Relations Department at the Anti-Corruption Action Center. Hello, Tetyana, and thank you so much for joining us on Ukraine this week.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yes, now, before we get into our main topics, things have really culminated this week. I understand you're sitting there without power. We have this corruption scandal unfolding for the second week. Situation on the front lines is difficult, and we have this 28-point peace plan that was stitched together by the United States and Russia without Ukraine or Europe. What is the general feeling in Ukraine at the moment? How do you feel as a Ukrainian?
It's a moment of a huge uncertainty and frankly speaking, very emotional moment because we had this corruption revelations which hit really hard to people's morale. And now it looks like U.S. is pressuring us not for a peace, but for negotiated surrender, because this peace plan is not a peace plan. It's about its capitulation right now.
Right. Now, do you think that the corruption scandal has anything to do with the timing of this, with the revelation of this 28-point peace plan, and, of course, Washington's insistence that Ukraine sign it by next Thursday?
I think that correlation is a bit reversal, that we had this corruption scandal, and it really weakened inner position of President Zelenskyy, and it felt like a huge political crisis inside of Ukraine. Therefore, Russia and the US decided to push this peace plan because they felt Ukraine's weakness right now. So I think the connection is as this.
Many have been calling for Andriy Yermak, the chief of staff of President Zelenskyy, for his resignation. President Zelenskyy has refused. So what does this signal about President Zelenskyy, his knowledge of the scandal, maybe his involvement?
So people were calling for resignation of Andriy Yermak because he is embodiment of the concentration of power in presidential hands. And in these years of his presidency, President Zelenskyy built unprecedented vertical centralized power with a lot of control over different sectors of economy and law enforcement. And even with this concentration of powers, it was not used for good for the war effort. As it looks, it allowed major corruption, at least in the energy sector. And people believe that there should be political responsibility for that. As we cannot move with election and change of power, there is call to change how the power is governed right now, to share this power with other people, with technical professionals. And dismissal of Andriy Yermak would symbolize those changes and also the political responsibility for what has happened.
Right. Now, since the scandal broke, do you think that President Zelenskyy has lost a lot of support? Does the Ukrainian people trust him as they once did? And especially to manage the country at a time of war, what should he do to regain and solidify public trust? Excuse me.
Back in 2019, President Zelenskyy came into power with the promise to fight corruption, and actually he bashed at the time President Poroshenko for corruption of President Poroshenko's close allies. And what people see in 6 years, we see the same, that President Zelenskyy allowed his close friends to embezzle money from state company. So it really decreased trust in President Zelenskyy. We still don't know rating-wise what it will be in a few weeks or few months, but people were shocked, people were angry, and demanded President Zelenskyy real actions, and right now, not to delay it for further periods.
Former President Poroshenko is trying to capitalize on this as well this week, we saw, and we've seen members of his party in parliament, the opposition, wanting to get this government out of power, to change it somehow. What's the perception on this? Is it possible still during wartime to make this happening? And will Petro Poroshenko, I guess, gain politically against this scandal?
Of course, as any opposition leader, he wants to use the mistakes of the government into his purpose. But frankly speaking, I don't think that it will really change public opinion, because Poroshenko's own support and trust doesn't grow. People still remember his former mistakes. So what the real demand is that not for government of unity or whatever they try to call it, but for the return of independent professionals into the ministers and allowing them to take independent decisions, so we can go through this very difficult and challenging winter.
What about members of President Zelensky's own government and the members of parliament there? Has there been somewhat of a divide, or is everybody standing behind President Zelenskyy? What does that whole situation look like?
It looks like there is a conflict inside presidential party, because it's already kind of tradition that every win is President Zelensky's own win. But if there are mistakes and crises, his party is to blame. Especially this was happening in July, when the members of parliament of his party were blamed for the attack against independent anti-corruption institutions, and President didn't want to share this mistake. And now it looks like the same, that those ministers that were actually appointed by President Zelenskyy and selected by him and Andriy Yermak, that now the parliament should dismiss them, and they try to portray that it was the parliament who chose them and appointed to the position, so they have to clean up the dirt after those ministers. And the parliamentarians are demanding to share responsibility and to get back the agency. So I cannot say that entire faction has revolted against the president, but there are some opposition voices already that are actually demanding getting back the agency to the parliament.
Right now, concerning President Zelensky's future, I mean, I know he wanted to run in the upcoming elections if we get to a ceasefire and elections are eventually held. Do you think that his political career is essentially over now? Will he run again for president of Ukraine?
It's very early to say, especially if you have those peace talks or negotiations, surrender talks right now. But I think that given the coming election, any election, this corruption scandal would be definitely used against President Zelenskyy. So probably for him, it's time not to think about re-election perspective, but about his legacy. What would be his real legacy in Ukrainian history? Either he goes as the great president of wartime, or he goes into history just a wartime president that allowed rampant corruption or basically lost the war. So this is a historic moment for President Zelenskyy, and it's far away from just being re-elected.
Yeah, so basically, I guess you could say his legacy is at stake.
Yes, indeed.
So what do you think the consequences should be for those suspected of wrongdoing? Since there's martial law and Ukrainians are dying on the front lines, does this warrant the harshest possible punishment?
Ukraine is committed to the rule of law. It's, of course, not an easy way for us, but in this year we created trustworthy anti-corruption institutions and specialized anti-corruption court, which is actually delivering reliable verdicts which comply with the rule of law requirements. So it's wrong to say that we demand the harshest punishment for them. We demand justice, that anti-corruption institutions are allowed to gather necessary evidence and prosecute those guilty in these corruption crimes, and then court will have a time to give those verdicts. Unfortunately, criminal justice is not a very quick process. We understand that perhaps it will take several years to get to the final verdicts. And therefore, people of Ukraine demand political responsibility and immediate actions. So first of all, that everyone who was involved in these corruption schemes or everyone who allowed them to happen because of the political stance or negligence should get out of the office. And secondly, that everything should be done to prevent the same schemes in the future. So in a few months, we do not have new people, but basically stealing the same money from the state companies.
And I mean, we remember these protests took place back, I think in July it was, when President Zelenskyy was signing that bill to take the independence of Nabu and Sapo away. Does this prove that that institution is indeed doing what it was intended to do, what it was set up for, and that the anti-corruption efforts there are working?
Actually, now we see entire picture. So this actions of Nabu and Sapo last week actually completed the puzzle. So we see that those July attack against their independence was caused by the need to stop this investigation. And once they brought those evidence to the public, it showed the gravity of this investigation and why the politicians wanted to shut down the agencies, or at least to take control over these investigations, to hide those evidence. And I should underline that people feel really empowered that once they went to the street to protect these institutions, those institutions were able to show the good result. I cannot say that this is like perfect agencies that are not without internal problems, but they proved to be sufficiently independent to complete their task. And their task is fighting high-level political corruption and bring the people in power to accountability. And I think we are in the beginning of this process, but besides those anger and of the people because of corruption, they feel proud that finally in so many years of independence we have the institutions that can protect people from corrupt officials.
Right now, we hear that there's an FBI office within NABO. Is this what exactly does it do, and how is Washington involved in this?
Look, I think this is it's a kind of exaggeration of the fact. This is liaison officer within the institution, which is common for many law enforcement in many countries. They act upon the memoranda signed years ago. So it's like normal procedural cooperation between law enforcement agencies. Now people just dig out that fact and trying to say that this is something that Americans inspired to do Ukrainian law enforcement against its own government. I think it's a political speculation that doesn't have any foundation or evidence.
Okay, well, there was allegations that some of this money was actually transferred to Moscow. This makes many of us dumbfounded. How could this be possible that Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who has been fighting this war now for, since the full-scale invasion, almost 4 years, would have corruption ties actually transferring money to Moscow? How could this be?
It's actually great surprise for Ukrainians as well. But this is something that we could expect because this Energoatom, the nuclear power operator, has been under a Russian influence for years, historically, because Russia used to control nuclear sector since dissolvement of Soviet Union. We were surprised that it was not curbed away by security service, and the people who were involved this years ago are still in the game. So I hope it would be further investigated because what we've heard, what we've seen, gives just small episodes, and we want to see full picture and to see how it could really happen. And I hope that it will be delivered. We need some time and patience to wait, give time for law enforcement to complete their work.
Well, how do you think that this scandal is going to affect Ukraine's relationship with the EU, especially regarding anti-corruption reforms tied to integration?
This is actually what EU wanted us to do in our assessment of EU readiness to join the EU. There was also always mentioning that Ukraine should show the track record of fighting corruption. Now, this is a good example that Ukraine is really fighting the corruption. The institutions, the independent anti-corruption institutions, which were actually established because of the EU demand, they have capabilities, they have independence, and now they are showing the results. So I hope this would be highly assessed by the EU. But of course, this scandal shows that we still have a lot of homework to do. We have to curb corruption from many sectors, and probably the further EU assistance to Ukraine will have much stronger conditions and much more accountability. So the EU officials are sure that any aid given to Ukraine is not embezzled.
Right. Now, do we know where this money came from? I mean, did this come from the Ukrainian state budget? Was this American money? Was this European money? All we've really seen is these bundles of cash in somebody's closet, marked with, I believe, from a couple different treasury departments there in the United States. But we also saw euros.
So, if we talk about the cash that was seen in the picture, this was the money that were used for the laundering of the proceeds of the crime. What we understand on the embezzlement scheme from Energoatom is that the money is the money of the company, because the company is generating electricity. People pay tariffs for electricity, and the company gets the profits. And then those profits, the company money, were spent for different public procurements, for among others, the construction procurements on protection facilities from Russian missiles and drones. And the companies that were subcontracted, they were exaggerating the prices for which they were, for instance, building those facilities. And then what they received as a payment, they were given 10 to 15% as kickbacks to those involved in the money laundering scheme. So basically, this is the company money. But the thing is that this is a state company. So this money, if not misused, they should have been going to more construction of protection facility, or it could be taxes paid to the government, or could be interest from the profits, again going to the state budget. So in the end, those money should go to the state budget. That's why it also receives such a harsh reaction from the people, because they could be used for the war effort, or for IDPs, or for healthcare, whatever you name.
Mm-hmm. Right. And there was also some accusations that because of the onslaught on the energy infrastructure this year by Russia, that it really came to light that the investments weren't in fact made as they should have been made. What could have been done to make the electricity grid more resilient using these funds that were stolen by these individuals in and around Energoatom?
The main question is, beside the Energoatom, is about competence and dedication of Minister of Energy, Galushenko, which and next Minister of Energy. So basically, it looks like instead of thinking about how to better protect the grid, how to better protect the facilities, or develop cogeneration, like alternative sources of energy, they were thinking how to embezzle the money from the system. That's the main question. And then the second question would be to the state company, Energoatom, why they didn't invest their profits into building better facilities, into protection of the grid, or stockpiling the necessary equipment that would be used as spare parts or for the repair of the grid. For instance, now we have such a big electricity cost, not because the last Russian attack just destroyed some energy facilities. The problem is that it destroyed the energy grid that provides the energy from nuclear power plants to the main system, and therefore the nuclear power plants had to reduce the production. So in general, we can produce more, but we cannot transfer those electricity to the people, to the household. And this is primary example that this grid either was not protected, or we don't have enough spare parts to repair it quicker. And that goes the question about the work of those in the ministries and the company.
Final question here. President Zelenskyy has said that let the courts do their thing, let them work on this. And of course, you alluded to the rule of law. Of course, these suspects having their fair day in trial. How long will this process play out for Ukrainians to get justice here in this case?
As I told, criminal justice is a slow process, and it's intended to be slow because due process requires time. Gathering the evidence, especially gathering the evidence of the money laundered to thousands of countries, requires time, and we do not want to rush it. But I believe that President's words that justice has to do what it has to do is a kind of manipulation, because of course criminal justice is one thing, but we are talking about political responsibility and taking right actions right now, because winter is coming. It's already here, and it's not very easy winter for Ukrainians with all these electricity problems, and we require immediate actions on the political level. For instance, like appointment of new professional minister of energy. 2 weeks we don't have minister of energy, and there are a lot of jokes, that it looks like the minister of energy vanished together with energy in our households.
Well, unfortunately, and obviously it's going to be a huge stain on President Zelensky's legacy there, and well, it's going to be a very difficult winter. I'd like to thank you very much for coming on Ukraine this week. My guest, Tetyana Shevchuk, head of the International Relations Department at the Anti-Corruption Action Center. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of Ukraine This Week. Join us again next week for all the latest from the war in Ukraine. Thanks for joining us, and hope to see you then. Goodbye.